Chapter 31. Hidden Crisis. Stop.
Pussy.
A kunai fiercely stabbed into the heart of Uchiha Mainai. In the next moment, the two guardian ninjas arrived beside Uchiha Tunan and placed the two kunai on his neck. Damn it! Shunkawa stood in front of the iron bed, his face extremely ugly. He roared at Ryoki, who was staggering up at the door. Hurry up and inform Lord Ryo. Ryoki had just woken up from the illusion, and he still did not know what had happened. After being stunned for a while, he immediately ran out. Hee. At this time, Uchiha Tunan smiled sadly, and 2 lines of blood tears flowed out of his eyes. Ignoring the bitterness that was hanging around his neck, he moved his head to Uchiha Mainai's forehead and kissed her gently. Mainai, I love you. At this moment, Ryo, who had heard the news, also came in. Looking at the scene in the interrogation room, he was slightly stunned and said, What happened? Shunkawa hurriedly said, reporting to Lord Ryo, the matter is like this. After listening to Yamanaka Shunkawa's report, Yamanaka Ryo was also silent for a moment. He looked at the grief-stricken Uchiha Tunan and said in a low voice, Record your memories to me. All of you can leave. Yes. Uchiha Tunan did not pay attention to Yamada, who came in and fumbled to untie the metal ring that bound Uchiha Mainai. Only the blindfold was not removed. Then he picked up Uchiha Mainai's body and walked out with a blank face. Ryo subconsciously wanted to stop him. However, he retracted his hand halfway and sighed. You can go. Uchiha Tunan looked at Ryo with a pale face and said in a hoarse voice, Thank you. After saying that, Uchiha Tunan staggered away. For some reason, looking at Uchiha Tunan's back gave him a sad feeling. You can already use the Sharingan proficiently? Even 2 Chunin can't stop you. This talent. Ryo Yamanaka narrowed his eyes and looked at the record in his hand. Let the Hokage make the decision. After leaving the interrogation department, Uchiha Tunan did not go straight to the graveyard, nor did he go to the clan. Instead, they chose to take a detour and walk through the bustling street of Konoha village. How could there be no audience in this kind of scene? Along the way, the people around them were pointing at them. The people of the garrison wanted to go forward and ask, but they were stopped by the umbu sent by Hiruzen Sarutobi. Where is he going? In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi stared at the crystal ball in front of him and muttered. Now, Uchiha Tunan's situation was very bad in his eyes. Sarutobi counted. In these short 3 months, Uchiha Tunan had lost his clan brother, parents, classmates, and girlfriend. Kinship, friendship, and love were all left behind. Any child of the same age would definitely turn black. Even if they didn't turn black, they would probably be dispirited. It's hard to handle. Why didn't I think of it before? I should have protected that girl. Tunan, I hope you won't let me down. Uchiha Tunan carried Uchiha Mainai's body and sat down on the swing outside the ninja school. In the dark, several members of the umbu were watching from all directions. Mainai, this is the place where we first met. Without you, I don't plan to stay here anymore. After this semester ends, I will apply to graduate early. Take a look. Uchiha Tunan reached out his hand and gently opened a gap in Uchiha Mainai's blindfold. Under the blindfold, Uchiha Mainai's beautiful eyes widened in fear. If you don't die in peace, then don't look, lest you scare others. Uchiha Tunan pretended to sob, took back his hand that was holding the blindfold, and wiped the tears in his eyes. Then, he carried Uchiha Mainai's corpse to the cemetery for burial. After the burial, Uchiha Tunan knelt in the cemetery for a night. Perhaps because Hiruzen Sarutobi had secretly given the order, no one came to disturb him during this period. After all, this was the time when Uchiha Tunan was the weakest and needed the most comfort. It was also the most suitable time to take advantage of this opportunity. How could he leave such a great opportunity to others? Therefore, when the sky was slightly bright, Hiruzen Sarutobi arrived behind Uchiha Tunan. Tunan, cheer up. Mainai definitely does not want to see you like this. When Uchiha Tunan heard Hiruzen Sarutobi's voice, he turned and stood up. He pursed his lips and forced a smile. Yes, Mainai said that he likes mature and steady people. I can't cry. I can't cry. As he spoke, the tears in Uchiha Tunan's eyes rolled uncontrollably. He could only wipe them with his hands. While wiping, he explained, the dust went inside my eyes. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at this scene and sighed. He reached out to stroke Uchiha Tunan's hair and said, You have experienced too much and lost too much during this period. But you still have the village and me. There are still many people who care about you. You are still young. The village will protect you, and I will protect you. When you grow up, you will have to protect the village. Uchiha Tunan was stunned when he heard this. He stared at Hiruzen Sarutobi with sparkling eyes and said in a daze,
Hokage-sama.
Tunan.
Hokage-sama,
Finally unable to control his emotions, Uchiha Tunan hugged Sarutobi and buried his head in his arms. He looked like a child who had been wronged outside. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked down at Uchiha Tunan, who was sobbing in his arms. His eyes narrowed slightly, but no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, Uchiha Tunan, who was pretending to be sad, was also thinking. Was it so difficult to get the approval of this old man? It seemed that up until now, other than his parents, the other children who were recognized were all inexperienced children. This system did not give a progress bar. It was really a headache. Just like this, a short while passed. The red sun in the sky gently jumped and rose from behind the flaming rock. The golden sun sprinkled on the two of them, accompanied by the fluttering green leaves. The scene looked so harmonious and natural. Uchiha Tunan saw that it was about time. He left the embrace of Hiruzen Sarutobi, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. Hokage-sama, thank you. I will cheer up again and protect our village. Hiruzen Sarutobi saw that Uchiha Tunan was no longer sad, and his heart was relieved. He immediately showed a kind and warm smile and said, "Can you go to school on time tomorrow? Do you need me to approve your leave?" "I have no problem with that. Has there been any difficulties in life recently?" The two of them chatted like this as they left the cemetery. They walked together to the intersection of the commercial street before they parted ways. What happened yesterday had now become the gossip that the villagers talked about. On Uchiha Tunan's way home, the people around him were talking mysteriously and occasionally pointed at Uchiha Tunan. As the person involved, Uchiha Tunan naturally had no objection to this scene. Anyway, in this matter, he was innocent and sad. Suddenly, Uchiha Tunan's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he regained his calm. Right in front of him, a pale-faced man with long hair and waist was walking towards Uchiha Tunan. Look, one of the three ninjas, Orochimaru-sama.
Orochimaru-sama. Orochimaru-sama.
The surrounding passers-by discussed and looked at him with reverence. Orochimaru calmly nodded to the passer-by who greeted him. It had only been a few years since the end of the second battle, and the three were the pride of Konoha. When Orochimaru walked to Uchiha Tunan, he asked. Uchiha Tunan put his hands on his knees, and his eyes also revealed a look of reverence. He bowed to Orochimaru and said, "Orochimaru-sama." Orochimaru did not pay special attention to Uchiha Tunan, and just nodded like he did to others. The two brushed past each other. However, just after Orochimaru walked for a short distance, his eyes narrowed slightly. His intuition told him that someone was spying on him. He immediately stopped and turned around to look. He saw nothing strange on the vast street. Was it an illusion? Orochimaru glanced around again, and after making sure there was nothing wrong, he turned and left. Just after Orochimaru left the street, Uchiha Tunan took off his cap. Just a moment ago, when the two of them passed by each other, Uchiha Tunan felt a special and familiar chakra leak. He quietly observed with his eyes. In Orochimaru's ninja bag, there was a sealed test tube, which was soaked with a pair of Sharingan. Has it started? Looks like I have to be careful. I don't think he will provoke me. Little guy, you look very handsome wearing this hat. Thank you, but I'm afraid I don't have money to buy it. Uchiha Tunan smiled at the shop owner and put the cap back on the shelf. Chapter 32. Applying for Graduation. Returning home, Uchiha Tunan opened the diary and began to write the sad diary. Although his hands were constantly writing, his mind was filled with the soaked Sharingan. After writing, he went under the eaves and sat down, staring at the Uchiha clansmen who occasionally passed by the door in a daze. Now the Uchiha clansmen had returned to Konoha. In other words, if Orochimaru wanted to get the Sharingan from his experiments, he could only start from the village. He had 3 Magatama, and he was still at the edge of the clan, so he was a very convenient target. The war is completely over. It really makes people feel uneasy. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have rejected the Great Elder. Uchiha Tunan rubbed his temples. Previously, when he had awakened the 3 Magatama, the Great Elder had planned to let Uchiha Tunan move to the heart of the clan. However, at that time, Uchiha Tunan had already stood on the side of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Furthermore, he had so many secrets, so he rejected the Great Elder. I can only rely on myself, Uchiha Tunan muttered. After sizing up the layout of the courtyard, he got up and headed to the storage room. One must not have the heart to harm others, and one must have the heart to guard against others. Uchiha Tunan had always adhered to the principle of, if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will become a prisoner. Now, he could only take a little more precautions. The following days were peaceful. Uchiha Tunan did not intend to cause any more trouble, because the graduation season was coming. What? Tunan-kun, are you and Kakashi preparing to apply for an early graduation? Obito looked at Uchiha Tunan in surprise. Uchiha Tunan nodded humbly, not too sure, but I want to try. When Might Guy heard the conversation between Obito and Uchiha Tunan, he directly rushed to Kakashi and said excitedly, Kakashi, are you really going to apply for an early graduation? Kakashi nodded indifferently. Might Guy immediately clenched his fists, and his eyes seemed to be burning with passion. As expected of the enemy of my life. Since you want to graduate early, I will go with you and compete to see who can graduate. The loser runs 500 laps around the playground. Everyone in the classroom heard the loud roar of Might Guy. He saw a large group of girls rushing over with stars in their eyes. Is Kakashi going to graduate early? Is Tunan also going to graduate early? Tunan is so great. He is already confident of graduating early. I can't even use ninjutsu. Tunan already has the strength of Genin. Tunan is the most powerful. Kakashi is the most powerful.
Tunan-kun.
Kakashi. Uchiha Tunan and Kakashi were surrounded by a bunch of girls. The two sides began to fight. Obito looked at Rin, who was surrounding Kakashi, with an unhappy face. He slammed the table and announced loudly, I have decided. I also want to apply for an early graduation. I am the future Hokage. How can I fall behind? However, what he got in return was a group of girls rolling their eyes at him. Only Rin reminded him out of goodwill. Obito, if you want to apply for an early graduation, you must be proficient in the 3-body technique, and your usual grades must be A. Nanny? 3 body techniques? Obito and Might Guy covered their faces with their hands at the same time, looking as if they had just eaten something big. Might Guy was the first to react, and said to Kakashi with tears in his eyes, Damn it, as expected of Kakashi. This time, you won. At this time, Naoto Umino walked into the classroom. He coughed heavily. Everyone returned to their seats as fast as they could. Naoto Umino placed his hands on the desk and announced, Everyone, be quiet. Tomorrow is the final exam. I hope you can perform to your best. In addition, Tunan and Kakashi both applied to graduate early. Your exam location is in the 3rd grade classroom. Remember not to be late. You can go home early today. You guys have a good rest. Burn your youth. Just as Naoto Umino left, Might Guy took the lead and rushed out of the classroom. Looking at him, he should be ready to fulfill his promise and run 500 laps around the playground. Kakashi, you can do it.
Tunan-kun. Could be.
When everyone had left, Kakashi stood up and came to Uchiha Tunan, handing over a scroll. Take it. Everything is inside. Uchiha Tunan smiled and took the scroll. There were all good things inside, which could greatly increase Uchiha Tunan's sense of security. Thank you, Kakashi. How much is it? Uchiha Tunan took out his wallet and started counting the money. Kakashi held his head with both hands and said lazily, No need. Uchiha Tunan immediately put on a serious face and said solemnly, Kakashi, do you think I'm a friend? Why are you asking this? Kakashi blushed and turned his head to the other side. If you think I'm a friend, please accept this money. Friends help each other in times of crisis, not ask for more. Even if these things are not important to you. After saying that, Uchiha Tunan stuffed a stack of money into Kakashi's hand. Kakashi looked down at the thick money in his hand and was stunned. If you don't accept it, I will feel uneasy. If anything happens in the future, I will be sorry to trouble you. Trouble? Kakashi casually put the money into his pocket and said in a seemingly casual tone, Do you want to go to my house? There was a hint of seduction in his words. When Uchiha Tunan saw that Kakashi had accepted the money, he narrowed his eyes and smiled. No, I have to have a good rest today. Back home, Uchiha Tunan closed the courtyard door. Then, he opened the scroll in the room. After making a few seals, he reached out and patted the scroll. Release. A puff of white smoke rose, and the things sealed in the scroll appeared before his eyes. Uchiha Tunan began to count them one by one. 5 anti-explosion talismans, 4 Fuma shuriken, 2 barrels of burning oil, 2 barrels of chakra metal, and a barrel of condensed cement. These things didn't look like much, but they were expensive and not affordable for ordinary people. This was especially true for the anti-explosion talismans and chakra metal. It was estimated that the middle ninja could afford it, but he had to carry out many missions to accumulate enough. The pension money that his parents had given him when they died was also taken out by half, and most of these things are controlled products, and only ninjas can buy them. Of course, if Uchiha Tunan really wanted to buy it himself, he could also buy it from the clan. However, Uchiha Tunan was afraid that it would cause a misunderstanding and affect the relationship between the two. Fortunately, Uchiha Tunan still had a brother like Kakashi. Presumably, all of these things were bought by Kakashi on behalf of Tsukumo. Of course, it could not be ruled out that Kakashi directly took them out from his home. Uchiha Tunan began to connect the chakra metal wires to the sword in the Fuma shuriken and several kunai. After connecting, he sealed the Fuma shuriken and the kunai into the storage scroll. After the sky darkened outside, Uchiha Tunan moved the rest of the things into the courtyard. At the same time, the hidden white pigeons around the house simultaneously activated their Sharingan to prevent the situation in the courtyard from being discovered by people with ulterior motives. Chapter 33, Graduation Exam. The next day, Uchiha Tunan, who was busy until the middle of the night, woke up early. After a simple wash, he changed into a brand new shirt, put on a ninja bag, and went to the ninja school. Today was the final exam and also the graduation day. There was a large group of parents gathered outside the ninja school. When Uchiha Tunan arrived at the school gate, the group of parents began to quietly talk about it. That is the genius of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Tunan. I heard from my child that he applied for an early graduation with another genius, Kakashi. This little guy seems to be only in the second year.
No.
This Uchiha Tunan and Kakashi are only in the first year. Why are the children of other people so fierce? I heard that this Uchiha Tunan was too sad when his parents died and awakened the Sharingan. When I think about my child, I want to jump into the river with his mother and let him wake up. This little guy looks gentle and doesn't seem to be very powerful. A while ago, it seemed that he was the one who wandered around with a little girl's body. So it's him. I heard that the little girl is his girlfriend. Children nowadays are in love so early. No, I have to teach my child well. At least in the 3rd grade, they can fall in love. What is there to care about? Your child is a girl. At this moment, Uchiha Tunan came to the back of the two parents who were discussing and said politely, "Please give way, can I? Little fellow, go in quickly. You have to work hard." "Thank you, uncle." When Uchiha Tunan walked into the school, the head of the family looked at Uchiha Tunan's back and touched his chin. "Actually, if my child can fall in love with this little fellow, it's okay to think about it." Uchiha Tunan walked all the way to the graduate exam grounds. Pushing open the door of the examination room, he saw about 50 to 60 graduates sitting in the examination room. It was still early, and most of the people had obviously not arrived yet. Even Kakashi, who had always arrived early, had not yet arrived. With a gentle smile on his face, Uchiha Tunan nodded to the graduates in the classroom. Then, under the arrangement of the supervising teachers, they sat down in their seats. After a full half an hour, the following graduates came to the examination room one after another. Is that white-haired kid and that bespectacled kid the first-year freshman who applied to graduate early this year? Yes, don't underestimate them. I usually sit by the window and watch the actual combat drill of other grades. These two brats are ridiculously strong. Silence. The supervising teacher said seriously. Next, distribute the test papers. Don't whisper to each other. If someone is caught cheating by me, the result will be directly 0. Soon, the test paper was distributed to everyone. Uchiha Tunan took a look, and the content of the test paper was very simple. It could be said that it was so simple that Naruto could pass, and it was all a choice question. It seemed that the theoretical knowledge learned in the school only played a role in Chunan's exam. Uchiha Tunan shook his head, picked up the pen, and quickly wrote the answer on the exam paper. Question: how did chakra come about? A. It came from nothing. B. It was produced by digesting food. C. The combination of body energy and spiritual energy. The 3 choices were right to choose C or the longest if you didn't understand. Question: what can a clone cast by a clone do? A. Help me do my homework. B. Tickle yourself. C. Walk. There were 20 silly multiple-choice questions in a row, and it was just right that all 12 questions were chosen to be C. As long as they chose C, they would be able to pass. At this time, most of the people had already finished their exam papers and were sitting in their seats. After about half an hour, the supervising teachers began to put away their exam papers one by one. At this time, Naoto Umino seemed to have finished supervising the first year's final exam and came to the graduation exam hall to help with the exam. As soon as he entered, he gave Kakashi and Uchiha Tunan an encouraging look. Uchiha Tunan nodded with a smile on his face. The supervising teacher put the test paper down, then stood up and announced, "Next is the ninjutsu test. This year's topic is the body substitution technique." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire classroom was filled with complaints and clamoring. "Nanny, why is it the most difficult body substitution technique to form seals? I can't even remember the seal of body substitution. I do know how to seal, but I failed 9 out of 10 times. Last year's graduates only got the simplest transformation technique. Damn it. Yesterday, teacher vowed that this year's graduation bet was a clone technique." In the face of this scene, the veins on the supervising teacher's forehead bulged. He slapped the desk heavily and shouted, "Shut up. If you speak again, get out." Instantly, the examination room was silent. Seeing that there was no more words, the supervising teacher continued, "In addition, there are 2 people who have applied to graduate early this year. Because the content of the exam was different from the rest, it was the priority to take the exam." Then he nodded to Naoto Umino beside him. Naoto Umino understood and said in a clear voice, "Kakashi." Everyone's gaze shifted to Kakashi. They saw that Kakashi looked listless as he lazily walked to the front of the podium. Naoto Umino awkwardly smiled at the supervising teacher beside him. Then, he coughed lightly and said, "Kakashi, be serious. Come and perform all 3 of your body substitution arts once." Hearing this, Kakashi stretched out his hands. His hands seemed to have disappeared, making it impossible to see the trajectory of the hand seals. Even the white smoke did not rise, and another Kakashi appeared beside him. In the next moment, Kakashi, who was standing in place, turned into Uchiha Tunan, and the clone began to walk out of the classroom. There is also a substitution technique, Naoto Yumino prompted. Just as he finished speaking, he heard a bang. Kakashi, who was standing in place, instantly turned into a substitute. You can go now. They saw that Kakashi, who everyone thought was a clone, was standing at the door with one hand pulling the doorknob. The supervising teacher said with a look of appreciation, "Not bad. Not only are you proficient in the 3 techniques, you can also combine them and use them." 3 days later, this classroom will receive a ninja forehead guard and get to know your teacher. After saying that, he recorded Kakashi's exam results in his notebook. Kakashi shrugged his shoulders, pushed open the door, and walked out. Amazing. This Kakashi is so powerful. Is the genius of the other Uchiha clan even more powerful? I heard that this person has awakened his Sharingan. At this time, Naoto Yumino also looked at Uchiha Tunan, who was sitting in his seat, and said loudly, "Next, Uchiha Tunan." Uchiha Tunan walked to the front, bowed to the 2 teachers, and then made a no sign. A white smoke rose, and Uchiha Tunan became Naoto Yumino. After removing the transformation technique, Uchiha Tunan began to release the avatar technique again. 2 identical Uchiha Tunan appeared in front of everyone. I feel like I can't compare to the white-haired one just now. That's right. I thought he was more powerful. From the looks of it, he doesn't seem like much, although he is a little stronger than me. Uchiha Tunan slowly and rhythmically completed the seal. His body turned into a ball of white smoke, and a piece of substitute wood fell to the ground. His figure appeared at the side. "Teacher, is it done?" Uchiha Tunan looked at the supervising teacher with a humble face. Uchiha Tunan's performance was a little mediocre. The supervising teacher just nodded lightly and casually evaluated a good score in the book. "Not bad, but you are still not very skilled. You need to practice more in the future. You pass. Come back in 3 days." Uchiha Tunan did not care about the difference between the supervising teacher and bowed with his hands on his knees. "Thank you, teacher." Naoto Yumino naturally knew that Uchiha Tunan's understanding of the 3 techniques was no less than Kakashi's. On the contrary, he had a better impression of Uchiha Tunan's simple performance. Looking at the polite Uchiha Tunan, Naoto Yumino smiled in his heart and said, "This is the result of your own hard work. Go back and have a good rest." Uchiha Tunan nodded and turned to walk out of the examination room. The supervising teacher took advantage of the free time to arrange the information and whispered to Naoto Yumino, "You have taught 2 good students. You have only been in school for a year and graduated. It's really enviable." A surge of joy rose in Naoto Yumino's heart. He scratched his head in joy and said, "Not bad, not bad." Ding. Obtain the recognition of Naoto Yumino. At this time, Uchiha Tunan had just arrived at the entrance of the examination room. When he heard the system's prompt, he immediately stopped in his tracks. His eyes narrowed and his lips curled up. He turned around and looked at Naoto Yumino. Naoto Yumino, who was scratching his head, suddenly frowned and felt a chill run up his spine. What was going on? Naoto Yumino subconsciously raised his head and scanned the students in the examination room. Finally, he caught a glimpse of Uchiha Tunan, who was looking back with a smile at the door. For some reason, Naoto Yumino felt that Uchiha Tunan's smile was creepy. He immediately swallowed his saliva and asked doubtfully, "Tunan, is there anything else?" Uchiha Tunan's smile became even more brilliant, removing the chill from Naoto Yumino's body. "Teacher Yumino, I will soon become a genin. You have to work hard, don't let me catch up." Uchiha Tunan said in a teasing tone, then turned and left. Naoto Yumino smiled and instantly forgot all about the strange feeling. This kid also encouraged the teacher in turn. The supervising teacher pondered for a moment and said slowly, "I think what he said is true. With his talent, he will probably be Chunin like you in a few years." Naoto Yumino was stunned when he heard this. After thinking about it carefully, he agreed with the supervising teacher. To be surpassed by his own student? Thinking about it, he was quite happy. However, if he was overtaken too quickly, he would be looked down upon by the students. Just wait and see. Before you and Kakashi become Chunin, I must promote to Jounin. Little did he know, Tunan had already killed Chunin. Chapter 34, Distribution of Personnel. After the exam, the list of graduates and results were sent to the Hokage's office. Next, Hiruzen Saratobi, Hamura, and Koharu, the 2 Hokage consultants, decided to divide the team. And the lead teacher of each team. The weak team was usually led by Chunin. Only a team with great potential would be qualified to be led by teacher Jounin. Hamura took a stack of graduation lists and began to distribute them according to the specialties of each graduate. Ino Shikacho is still in a small team according to the old rules, Hamura said as he put the 3 graduation transcripts together and handed them to Koharu. On the other hand, Koharu went to bed to match the lead teacher according to various considerations. Hiruzen Saratobi sat in front of his desk, smoking his cigarette one mouthful at a time. He looked at the 2 results sheet on the table and fell into deep thought. Kohara glanced at Hiruzen Sarutobi and asked, Saru, how are you going to allocate the two geniuses who graduated ahead of time? At the same time, Koharu also cast a look of concern. Hiruzen Sarutobi blew out a smoke ring and muttered, let's get them into team. Hamura asked doubtfully, then there is still one person missing. Hiruzen Sarutobi put the pipe on the table, thought for a moment, and said, just two people. The strength of Kakashi and Tunan almost reached the level of Chunin. Tunan may be a bit weaker, but by using the illusion technique of Sharingan, he can subdue two Chunin in a short time. Although physical skills and ninjutsu are a bit lacking, it just happens to complement Kakashi. Kohara nodded, thought for a moment, and said, then which lead teacher are you going to give them? Hiruzen Sarutobi narrowed his eyes, obviously not having considered it yet. At this moment, the door of the Hokage's office was pushed open and Danzo walked in. Hiruzen, how are the divisions of this year? Hiruzen Sarutobi frowned. Why are you asking this? Danzo walked over to Hiruzen Sarutobi and said with a matter-of-fact expression, as the root that protects Konoha, is there anything wrong with caring about the younger generation? Hiruzen Sarutobi pointed at Hamura and Koharu. It's still being distributed. Danzo turned around and looked at the transcript in Hamura and Koharu's hands. Then he narrowed his eyes and looked at the two transcripts in front of Hiruzen Sarutobi. He pointed and said, I heard that Kakashi and the genius of Uchiha's family have graduated early. Hiruzen Sarutobi put the two transcripts into the drawer and nodded. Well, I plan to divide the two of them into a small team. Hiruzen Sarutobi's action made Danzo feel a burst of anger. He said in a low voice, have you chosen the lead teacher? I'm still considering. There's no need to think about it. I have a suitable candidate here. Who? The Aburame clan's Jounin, Aburame Ryosuke. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at Danzo in surprise, then took a closer look. Aburame Ryosuke was considered a veteran Jounin, so he should be more than enough to teach Kakashi and Uchiha Tunan. However, Hiruzen Sarutobi always felt that something was. He immediately shook his head and refused. He is not suitable. Danzo snorted and said, how is it not suitable? Kakashi should have inherited White Fang's sword technique, and his ninjutsu is also very outstanding. And that little brat Uchiha has awakened his Sharingan and is very good at illusion techniques. The two of them formed a small team without any shortcomings. But this small team lacked the most important member, medical ninja. Hearing this, Hiruzen Sarutobi was slightly stunned. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't remember when Aburame Ryosuke had shown his medical talent. He immediately stared at Danzo with a suspicious gaze and said, Aburame Ryosuke also knows medical ninjutsu? Danzo leisurely said, the newly hatched bug is very special. Not only can it detoxify, but it can also create a special life factor that can be used as a rescue. After listening, Hiruzen Sarutobi picked up his pipe and smoked. The smoke seemed to surge into Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes, causing him to narrow his eyes slightly. Information about Aburame Ryosuke appeared in his mind. The Aburame clan's Jounin had always been like a transparent person. However, he seemed to be the main relative of Yumui, who was the head of the army. Although this Yumui didn't belong to the root, all the signs indicated that he was already close to Danzo. What was the most lacking thing in the team formed by these two people? Kakashi has White Fang to teach him, and it seems that no teacher can help him more. As for Tunan, he had 3 Magatama Sharingan, even if he couldn't keep up with his physical skills and ninjutsu. With dynamic vision, his physical skills would gradually grow and surpass his peers. Moreover, with the Sharingan, learning ninjutsu would not be slow. Then we can't consider strength. We have to start from character. Tunan has experienced too many changes recently, and I can't pay attention to him all the time. We need someone who is cheerful and has the will of fire to guide him, so that he doesn't go the wrong way. Suddenly, a sunny smile appeared in Hiruzen Sarutobi's mind. It was him. Hiruzen Sarutobi immediately made a decision and decisively rejected Danzo. No, I have already thought of a candidate. Danzo, who had thought that victory was within his grasp, couldn't hold it in any longer. He slammed the table angrily and asked Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hiruzen, what do you mean? Do you think I have ulterior motives? Hamura and Koharu quickly persuaded. Danzo, calm down. Let's talk about it. Hiruzen Sarutobi waved his hand and said firmly, enough. I have decided to make Minato their team's teacher. Danzo was stunned for a moment and said in disbelief, Minato? The little boyfriend of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Hiruzen, what are you thinking? That little brat has just been promoted to Jounin. Are you going to destroy the two geniuses in his hands? At this moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi was also a little angry. His face suddenly turned cold. He put his pipe aside and said coldly, pay attention to your attitude. I am the Hokage. Danzo looked straight at Hiruzen Sarutobi, and Hiruzen Sarutobi was not to be outdone. The two of them looked at each other for a few seconds, and Danzo's face was extremely ugly. He snorted coldly and turned to walk out. Himph, you will regret it. Danzo stormed towards the route. However, as soon as they reached the base camp, the anger on his face disappeared. Instead, he looked calm. What kind of illusion did that evil little devil cast on you? Why are you guarding against me like this? What evil thoughts do I have? Everything is for Konoha. Then, he asked Shurhei, the captain of Route, who was beside him, how's Orochimaru's experiment going? The situation is not ideal. The last pair of Sharingan is also destroyed. What did Orochimaru say? Orochimaru-sama said that because the energy contained in the Sharingan is insufficient, it cannot offset the exuberant vitality in the cells. He suggested that you find a few more pairs of Sharingan, preferably the ones with higher quality. I understand. Isn't your cousin willing to join Root School? Go and recruit him now. Bring him to me after you have arranged it. I have a task for him to do. If he does well, he will be a member of Root School in the future. If he doesn't do well... Chapter 35. Exposed. Uchiha's Clan Grounds. After hearing that Uchiha Tunan had graduated early, the Great Elder came to the door. At this time, Uchiha Tunan was sitting under the eaves, carving a piece of wood with a bitter expression. The ground was full of wood fragments, and soon a lifelike wooden carving appeared in front of him. The object of the carving was Uchiha Mainai. Some people were dead, but he still had value for living people to consume. He put the carved Uchiha Mainai into the house and picked up a piece of wood to carve Uchiha Ameo. The Great Elder pushed open the open door and saw Uchiha Tunan, who was carving Uchiha Ameo's statue under the eaves. Great Elder, do you have any instructions for me? Uchiha Tunan put down the wooden sculpture and bowed with his hands on his knees. The Great Elder smiled and came in front of Uchiha Tunan. He sized him up. He glanced at the furnishings in the room and saw a few wooden sculptures placed on the partition. It was Uchiha Tunan's parents and Uchiha Mainai. We are family. There is no need to be so formal. After the Great Elder finished speaking, he sat next to Uchiha Tunan like a grandpa next door. Uchiha Tunan paused for a moment, got up and went into the room to pour a cup of tea for the Great Elder. Then, he sat down next to him. Tunan, you really like drinking tea. The Great Elder took a sip of tea and narrowed his eyes. Uchiha Tunan nodded lightly. He stroked the half-finished wood carving in his hand and said, yes, reading and studying usually consumes too much energy. Drinking tea is more refreshing. The Great Elder glanced at the wooden carving in Uchiha Tunan's hand and sighed. You graduated in a blink of an eye. Time flies. Because time passes quickly, we have to cherish every minute and every second. Don't always wait until you lose it before you regret it. As Uchiha Tunan spoke, he took the kunai and began to carve the half-finished wood carving in his hand. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes as he looked at the group of white doves flying over in the distance. He said slowly, you are different from the other Uchiha clansmen. You are the most unique person I have ever seen. I always thought that I understood you the most, but sometimes I felt that I couldn't see through you. Do you feel guilty for leaving Ameo behind in the end? Uchiha Tunan paused when he heard this and said with a puzzled expression, I don't quite understand what the Great Elder means. The Great Elder smiled and looked at Uchiha Tunan. You know how to endure. You are very rational. You can even completely separate your rationality from your emotions and act rationally at a critical moment. Uchiha Tunan's heart skipped a beat. He put on a lonely expression and shook his head. What you said has nothing to do with me. I always act on impulse. Last time, I acted on impulse and attacked the seniors of the interrogation department. The Great Elder calmly drank the tea in his hand and then placed the teacup to the side. He took out a yellowed booklet from his bosom and gently placed it between the two. This thing has been in my hands for a long time. I will return it to you now. Uchiha Tunan's pupils contracted slightly as he picked up the book. The two of them sat there quietly. It was almost winter now, and the chilly breeze made Uchiha Tunan feel a little cold on his back. This book was the notebook that had been given to Uchiha Ameo back then, and the venom on it had long been used up. However, Uchiha Tunan found that the place where the venom was smeared had an unknown reaction with the paper. A portion of the paper was yellow. He miscalculated. Sure enough, the moves at that time were still too childish. If I hadn't awakened my Sharingan and displayed a value far beyond that of ordinary people, I would have died. Perhaps I was the one who was executed at that time. Uchiha Tunan instantly thought a lot. Don't even think about killing people to silence them. You can still bully people of your age. A veteran elite like Great Elder like Jounin, don't look at his smiling face. He might be able to pinch him to death. If he couldn't win, then he would move closer. The next moment, Uchiha Tunan threw up the book in his hand, opened his eyes, and opened his Sharingan. So, a kunai accurately hit the book and nailed it to a tree in the yard. Then he jumped up and his hands turned into shadows. Fire escape, Phoenix Fire Claw Red technique. A dense fireball was spat out from Uchiha Tunan's mouth and hit the big tree. Boomstreepje. The entire tree was instantly enveloped in raging flames. As the cold wind blew past, the dots of fire that were like stars fluttered in the wind. Uchiha Tunan stood with his back to the Great Elder and remained silent for a long time. The Great Elder looked at the burning tree with a face full of admiration, then shifted his gaze to Uchiha Tunan's back. He spat out one word from his mouth, "Genius." Then, he slowly got up and walked towards the courtyard gate. As he passed by Uchiha Tunan, he reached out and patted his shoulder. Just as the Great Elder was about to leave, Uchiha Tunan suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Great Elder, please believe me. I will always be a member of the Uchiha clan. But right now, I can only be half a person." Great Elder suddenly stopped, and a touch of joy appeared on his face. He turned around and looked at Uchiha Tunan. "I have always trusted you. Come to the Ancestral Hall in a few days. By the way, I will take you to a place to choose your new ninjutsu." After that, he gave Uchiha Tunan an encouraging look, then turned around and left. "Take care, Great Elder." Uchiha Tunan put his hands on his knees and bowed deeply. Ding, gained the recognition of Uchiha's heavenly treasure. He could not say too much to deal with this kind of old fox. He said 3 points and left the remaining 7 points to himself. After the Great Elder left, Uchiha Tunan straightened up and let out a sigh of relief. His face returned to a calm expression. He turned and walked into the bedroom. From the cabinet, he took out the long-sealed, Spy Advanced Disguise Technique, psychological game. At night, at the Nanga Shrine, the Great Elder and Uchiha Fuyue were sitting on their knees. "Great Elder, why did you call me here? Tunan is more talented than we thought." Huh. A hint of fanaticism flashed through the Great Elder's eyes. "Did you know? Today, he used Phoenix Fireclaw Red in front of me. His chakra fluctuation is infinitely close to Jounin." Hearing this, Uchiha Fuyue said with a face full of disbelief, "What?" Great Elder turned his head to look at the stone tablet that was stored in the shrine, and said with excitement, "This is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that he has always been loyal to Uchiha." Uchiha Fuyue calmed down and stroked his chin. "You mean that everything he usually shows is fake?" The Great Elder nodded heavily. "Not only does he have extraordinary talent, but he also has the strength that no one in the Uchiha clan can match. Everything he did was to numb the upper echelons of Konoha." Uchiha Fuyue's eyes immediately lit up, and then he frowned. "Then who poisoned Ameo?" "It's him. He should be trying to awaken his Sharingan." He really has a good relationship with Ameo, and he really likes Mainai. But his reason tells him that if he wants to obtain power, he must do this." Uchiha Fuyue suddenly realized something and began to imagine. That's why he destroyed his own fetters with his own hands. No wonder he chose to end Mainai's life with his own hands at the last moment. But hasn't he already awakened the 3 Magatama? Why is he still doing this? Perhaps he felt that he had already reached that level. Manjikyu. He should have failed. After all, his age is still young. But I believe that he will definitely be able to open the kaleidoscope in the future. What do you plan to do? You and I will know about this. Let's wait for that little guy to grow up. What we need to do is to keep a distance from him. When Konoha's higher-ups are here, they will try their best to win him over. In addition, I have decided to give him that spell,